I only stopped there because my tank was nearly empty. It was already past 11 at night, and the road seemed to stretch forever between empty fields and dense patches of woods. The only open gas station was an old one with a worn-out sign, and a convenience store lit by flickering white lights. No other cars. Just me and the soft creak of the pump as I started fueling. The store seemed deserted, but a bell rang when I pushed the door open. The sound echoed longer than it should have. The shelves were almost bare, and behind the counter, no one, just a ceiling fan turning slowly, squeaking with each spin. I grabbed a bottle of water and left the money on the counter. I didn't want to stay there longer than necessary. When I got back to the car, I noticed the pump screen read 0, as if no fuel had been pumped. I looked at the tank, and it was still empty. That was odd, but even stranger was that I was sure I'd heard the final click, the sound that means the tank is full. I frowned. Probably broken, I thought, but that ... was only the beginning. I decided to try again. Removed the nozzle, placed it in the tank, and pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. Not a sound, no pressure. I got into the car to drive off and find another station. Then realized the dashboard was completely dead. Not only had the fuel not gone in, but now the car seemed completely out of power. Just like that, I tried not to panic. Grabbed my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. Not even the station's open Wi-Fi worked. I started walking back to the convenience store, but stopped halfway when I heard a loud snap from behind me. I turned around and saw the fuel cap swaying gently, like someone had just let go of it. That's when I knew something was wrong. The wind had stopped. The exterior lights were now blinking in sync, emitting a low, almost imperceptible buzz. The darkness around me felt closer, like the small circle of light was shrinking. And in the back of the store, a silhouette appeared. Behind the glass dot, the figure didn't move. It stood still in the darkness of the store, beyond the dirty glass, where the light didn't reach. I couldn't see a face, no clothing, not even a defined shape, just a black outline, unmoving, as if watching me. I blinked, and for a moment, it vanished. When I looked again, the store appeared completely empty, just like before. I tried to brush it off. Walked quickly to the car and shut the doors, as if that could protect me. Took a deep breath, turned the key again, and the engine gave a faint jolt, but didn't start. The radio turned on by itself for a second, letting out a strange static like a broken voice trying to say something. Then everything went dark again. What happened next stayed with me. The radio came back on briefly, and I heard a whisper say my name. It wasn't someone who knew me. It was like something had just discovered who I was. My eyes widened, and I looked around, but no one was there. Just the distant sound of a gas pump running by itself. No car, no person. Just the nozzle clicking repeatedly against the concrete. I left the car immediately. The static from the radio stopped the moment I opened the door, like the presence had retreated for a moment. The pump that had been running alone was now spilling fuel onto the ground. I ran over and tried to shut off the handle, but it wouldn't respond, and there was no gasoline smell in the air. It was like the whole thing was just a simulation. Something pretending to be real. If I had left right then, maybe everything would have been different. But I froze. A metallic noise echoed from the opposite side of the station, as if someone had dragged an empty barrel. I turned quickly, and in the reflection on the glass for a second, I saw that dark silhouette again, now much closer. But when I turned to face it, nothing was there. I couldn't tell what had changed. But something had. The store now seemed bigger than before. The distance between shelves looked stretched, like an endless corridor. One of the ceiling lights began to spin slowly, creaking, and the automatic door opened by itself. A cold, dry wind blew from inside, sending chills across my entire body. I walked into the store, heart racing, trying to convince myself there was a logical explanation. But as soon as I crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me, and the lights flickered one last time before going completely dark. Total blackout, and that's when I realized I wasn't alone inside. I rushed to the counter, feeling my way around. I could hear footsteps, but I couldn't tell from where. Then, in two brief flashes of the emergency light, I saw it, a faceless figure, standing just a few feet away, arms hanging at its sides. With every flash, it was closer. I tried to run toward the back of the store, but tripped over a shelf and fell sideways, knocking over a row of items. I ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. At the same time, the figure moved across the aisle with dragging steps, as if it knew I had no way out. I grabbed a can on the floor and threw it at the thing, but there was no sound of impact. It was as if it wasn't really there. And yet, it was everywhere at once. I managed to crawl to a side door that led to the storage area. It was unlocked. I entered and pushed some boxes against the door, even though I wasn't sure it would help. The room was drenched in a dim grayish light coming from a dirty skylight above. Inside, the air was colder and heavier. A buzzing filled my ears, and I felt like something was closing in without making a sound. I backed into the far corner, trying to control my breathing. That's when I heard my name again, coming from inside the room. But this time it wasn't a whisper, it was a rough, stretched voice, as if the wall itself had spoken. The skylight darkened for a moment, as if something passed over it, blocking out what little light remained. Time seemed to pause. I don't know how long I stayed there, curled up, waiting. Eventually the buzzing faded, the door stopped creaking. And finally, when everything seemed too quiet, the store's bell rang again, on its own, as if someone had just walked in. I waited a few more minutes before I had the courage to leave the storage room. The store was empty again, nothing out of place. The lights were back on, but the sign above flickered like it was about to die. My car started on the first try, like nothing had ever gone wrong. Only the radio stayed dead, silent, like something inside had been ripped out. I didn't look back as I pulled out of the parking lot. I drove past the pump, the store, the entrance, and back onto the road without thinking twice. A few miles later, I noticed my tank was full, even though I'd never managed to fill a dot in the rearview mirror. The station sign faded slowly, but the store door was still open, and someone stood there, again, under the dim light. The figure didn't move, and the gas station never showed up on GPS again. My first night on the job felt quieter than I expected. The manager only showed me the basics: register cameras, key to the outside bathroom, and left in a hurry, saying, "We'll sort out the rest later." I stood there alone, in a new uniform, trying to look confident behind the glass counter. With the store overly lit and the road outside completely empty. It was just past 10 p.m. and traffic had already vanished. Only one truck had passed without stopping. I took the opportunity to check the cameras for angles, pumps, store entrance, back alley, and the side path where the old barrel sat. Oddly, the feed from the alley looked darker than it should have. I blinked and refreshed the screen. Nothing changed. I shrugged it off. Probably a bad camera. But then I heard a dull sound from the back of the store. A hollow thump, like someone hitting one of the stockroom doors. I turned immediately but saw nothing. Still, I went to check. When I got close, I saw that one of the lights was out right where the manager had said the bulbs sometimes take a while to turn on. But it had lit up normally just minutes before. I opened the stockroom door and stepped inside, using my phone's flashlight. The shelves were dusty, full of old boxes and stained cloths. There was a weird smell, not exactly rotten, more like damp paper sealed too long. The sound of the store's ceiling fan barely reached back here, and the silence felt heavier. I tried to ignore it. I flipped the light switch, which clicked but didn't turn on. I rolled my eyes and turned to leave. That's when I heard the counter radio click on by itself. That faint metallic sound, followed by a low hiss. I left the stockroom faster than I had entered, thinking maybe someone was calling through the intercom. But the store was empty, and the radio was off. And then the silence grew heavier than usual. I felt a strange chill crawl up my spine, like someone had just passed behind me. I turned around, but everything looked exactly the same. The camera feed showed the usual angles, but now on the screen showing the alley. The metal back door was wide open, even though I knew I had chained it shut at the start of my shift. I grabbed the chain key and rushed to the back door. Cold night air hit my face as I opened the inner door. The chain was still wrapped. But the padlock was hanging open, like someone had calmly unlocked it without breaking anything. The metal door swung slowly in the wind, creaking in a rhythm that almost felt intentional, like it was being pushed by an invisible hand. That's when I realized something was wrong. I went back inside, locking the door as best I could. The radio crackled again, but this time I ignored it. I just wanted the shift to end. I sat on the tall stool behind the register, trying not to look directly at the monitor screens. But it was impossible not to notice that, in the corner of the alley camera feed, a shadow seemed to move, very fast, almost imperceptible. I stared at it, and for a second, it was gone. I sighed in relief and reached for one of the store manuals. When I looked back at the monitor, there was a figure standing still in the hallway, facing away. No visible face, head slightly tilted like it was listening to something. I blinked. The screen glitched. And when it came back, the hallway was empty again. I headed straight for the side door that led to the alley. No one there. No footprints. No wind. Just darkness and the distant sound of some animal beyond the station. I locked that door too and went back inside. I was starting to regret taking that shift. My phone still had no signal, and the clock didn't seem to move from the same minute. If I had left right then, maybe none of this would have happened. I sat down again, leaning against the stockroom wall, just out of the camera's view. I needed a break from those screens. I had my head down when I heard the radio crackle for the third time this time, followed by a faint voice, like someone whispering half-formed words. The sound came and went like an old tape being rewound. Couldn't tell what had changed, but something had. I walked to the front of the store and looked around. The reflections on the glass were wrong. They didn't match my movements in real time. I moved my arm, and the reflection took 2 full seconds to react. The light blinked once, twice, and in the freezer door's reflection beside me, I saw someone standing behind me, but when I turned around, no one was there. The store lights went completely out, as if someone had pulled the breaker. The radio hissed softly, the voice insistently repeating syllables I couldn't understand. I tried to run to the main door, but it was locked. I pulled the handle hard, looked through the glass. No cars on the road, no sign of life. Just my reflection standing there. And even that began to look wrong. I ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. At the same time, the figure was crossing the hallway with slow steps, as if it knew I was trapped. It came from the stockroom area, where the hallway curved tightly. It made no sound, but the noise of light bulbs bursting behind it guided me. With each flicker, it was closer. The dark silhouette, faceless, floated slightly above the floor, as if it didn't belong to this place. I grabbed the bathroom key, the only thing in my pocket. I ran along the side, bumping into shelves, trying to reach the emergency door in the store's back corner. It opened. I entered the employee locker room and locked it from the inside. Dark, silent. I leaned against the cabinet and waited. But the radio was still hissing outside, and now it was repeating my name clearly. Time felt slower in there. The only sound was the ticking of an old wall clock, and I didn't remember seeing it before. The emergency light flickered weakly, casting shadows that stretched like fingers across the walls. I tried turning on my phone again. Nothing. No flashlight, no signal, no battery. It was like the whole place drained energy, like something in there needed absolute silence. The doorknob turned once, then again, but no one pushed it. Just the dry sound of metal shifting. I waited silently, holding my breath. After a few minutes, the light steadied. I carefully opened the door. The store looked exactly the same, but it didn't feel the same. The white light now had a bluish tint, and the cameras on the counter were all frozen on a single frame. A blurry image of the store, empty. I walked up to the radio, unplugged it, but the noise didn't stop. It kept hissing, louder than before. Suddenly, from the speaker, a final phrase came through clearly. "You should have stayed in the stockroom." I turned toward it and saw the stockroom door open again, even though I had locked it. The light inside was on, and someone was waiting on the other side, completely still. I stepped back, unable to look away from the stockroom door. The figure inside didn't move, but the light behind it trembled, like the space around it was pulsing. The radio went silent. No sound. No wind. Just the feeling that if I blinked, it would be closer. I ran out the side of the store, pushed open the bathroom door, and crossed the empty parking lot. The cold night air hit me hard. I jumped into my car, which now worked perfectly, and drove off without looking back. In the rearview mirror, the station looked dark, abandoned, like it had never opened that night. 3 days later, I called to quit. But the manager told me I had never been hired, said my name wasn't on any shift, that the station had been closed for renovation since last week. I should have stopped hours ago, but the road felt hypnotic at that hour. Nothing but headlights cutting through the dark and white stripes, passing like a metronome. The GPS said there was nothing for the next 40 kilometers, so I was surprised when I saw a lit sign ahead, gas and rest, 2 miles. I figured it was a map error, but followed anyway. I was too tired to care. The gas station appeared out of nowhere without warning. A narrow entrance to the right, surrounded by unusually tall, dense trees. I parked near the convenience store, but something felt off. No cars, no sound. The store was lit, but there was no sign, no brand. Just white light spilling from dirty windows. Strangest of all, the air felt too still, as if that piece of the world was cut off from everything else. I got out, shut the car door, and felt a chill crawl up my neck. The dashboard showed 246, but my phone still said 119. Just a glitch, I thought. But everything there felt just a few seconds out of sync. The lights blinked irregularly, and even my reflection in the glass seemed to move a little too late. I pushed open the store door, and a bell rang above me way too long, like the sound didn't want to end. Inside, the shelves were full, but with old products, faded labels, logos I hadn't seen in years. The fridge made a constant humming noise, but none of the drinks were cold. From behind the counter, a weak voice said, "Evening." "Just a full tank," I tried to ignore how strange it felt. A thin man with a pale face and low-hanging cap stood there. But there was something odd about his eyes, or maybe the way he never looked directly at me. I asked for an energy drink and swiped my card. The machine took too long, then displayed, "Approved at 2:46 a.m." The same time as the dashboard, exact, frozen. That's when I knew something was wrong. I walked out, in silence, trying not to look nervous. As I got closer to the car, I noticed the pump display already showed the amount of the purchase. Even though no one had touched the nozzle, the fuel cap was open, and the pump was dripping a dark liquid that didn't look like gas. I got closer to the pump carefully. The dark liquid evaporated quickly, with no smell. I touched it instinctively and felt an immediate chill shoot up my arm, like I had dipped my hand into ice water. I pulled back. The nozzle fell on its own, as if someone had just let go of it. I looked around, no sound, no bugs, no wind. Just a faint electric buzzing from the lights above. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was just tired. I got in the car, turned the key, but the radio powered on by itself and started playing an old song, like from another era. It was something I vaguely remembered from childhood, but the voice was warped, slowed down, like it was being sung underwater. What happened next stayed with me. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw that the station looked different now. The store seemed farther away. The pumps were in a different spot. And between my car and the road, there was a phone booth that hadn't been there before. Inside, someone seemed to be watching me, but when I turned to look directly, there was no booth at all. I got out of the car, confused, wondering if I was just hallucinating. I walked across the parking lot toward the entrance again, but noticed my footsteps didn't echo, even on concrete. As I got closer to the store, I saw that the interior was now dark, completely off, like it had been abandoned for years. If I had left right then, maybe everything would have been different. I turned to head back to the car, but it wasn't where I remembered it. It had moved forward a few meters, as if pushed. The driver's door was open. The radio was still on. The same song looping, repeating the same distorted line over and over. I couldn't explain what had changed, but something had. On the ground near the pump, I now saw wet footprints, large, deep, leading toward the store. But there were no tracks coming from anywhere. The prints began right there, like they had just appeared out of nothing. And even in silence, I knew something else was moving with me. I ran to the car, but the interior was freezing, like it had been sitting there for days. I turned the key, nothing, no response. The radio shut off on its own, and at the same moment, the horn blared, loud and sharp. I jumped in my seat and tried to get out, but the door was stuck. The overhead light was flickering nonstop. I ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. At the same time, the figure was crossing the station with slow steps, like it knew I was trapped. It came from the dark store, now deformed by the shadows. The face didn't exist, just a smooth mass turned directly toward me. Each step seemed to pull the silence tighter, like sound was being drained from the space around it. I shoved the door with my shoulder until it gave way. I fell onto the pavement, scrambled to my feet, and ran around the opposite side of the station toward the highway. Behind me, the music played again, but this time from nowhere. It echoed from the building, from the trees, from every direction at once. I ran without looking back until I crossed the road, where the darkness felt even deeper. I tried my phone again, but all it showed was a blank white screen, no signal. No time, nothing. On the other side of the road, when I looked back at the station, it was gone. In its place, just tall grass and an empty lot, like nothing had ever been built there. The music still echoed, but fainter now, muffled, like it was coming from inside my head. I kept walking along the road, trying to remember how far I'd come. From the last town. After a few minutes, I saw headlights approaching from the opposite direction. An old car with dim beams stopped beside me. The driver rolled down the window slowly. An old man, calm expression, like he had expected to find me there. He asked, "You saw the station too, didn't you?" I didn't answer, I just got in. The engine rumbled softly, and he drove off. In the rearview mirror, for just a second, the station's sign reappeared in the middle of the weeds, blinking faintly. Then, it was gone again. The man didn't say anything else during the drive. Just stared at the road ahead. His car radio was off, but now and then, I could still hear that same old song playing softly, like it was coming from deep in the trunk. Eventually, he dropped me off at a lit gas station near a bigger highway. A normal place with people, movement, noise. It didn't even feel like the same night when I turned to thank him. His car was already turning the corner, vanishing into the dark without a trace of taillights. I went into the restroom to pull myself together. In the mirror, I saw a dark stain on the collar of my shirt, the same liquid that had dripped from the other station's pump. I looked at my reflection, and for a second, it didn't move with me.